Acting is a glamorous job, but it's still a job nonetheless, and just like any other job, it's susceptible to human error. So what happens when your favorite stars make a big mistake on set? Well, sometimes movie magic happens. Let's check out 10 examples of actors we caught making a mistake in one of their films. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe to Screen Rant and join the notification squad so you can stay up to date with all of our uploads. Before we get started, can you guess the name of this movie based on these emojis? We'll let you know the answer at the end of this video.
Relax, pal. It's cool to have a code name. It's not that weird.
Guardians of the Galaxy. With a stellar cast featuring Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, and Bradley Cooper, and imaginative direction from James Gunn, Guardians earned its spot in the ever-growing Marvel Cinematic Universe, and led to a successful sequel with a third film on the way. Those of us who are fans of Chris Pratt from his days on Parks and Recreation know that he's a whiz when it comes to improvisation. He's responsible for making up some of the funniest moments in the show, right on the spot. So it's no surprise that he brought his comedic chops to the role of Star-Lord. But what's perhaps more impressive is not just his improv skill, but his ability to roll with an honest mistake and turn it into a moment of comic gold. In the scene where the Guardians meet the Collector, Quill reaches out to show him the orb. During one take, Pratt accidentally dropped the prop on the ground. Another actor may have stopped the take right there and reset, but Pratt went along with it, picking it up off the ground and reaching it out again. This little mistake ended up being a great comedic beat, so director James Gunn kept it in the final cut.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
Star Wars: A New Hope. This next actor mistake has become infamous in the Star Wars universe, and it comes from the very first film in the franchise, A New Hope. Produced on a budget of just $11 million, Episode 4 would go on to gross over $700 million and become one of the most influential science fiction films of all time. In the scene, a team of stormtroopers manage to break through a blast door, looking for C-3PO and R2-D2 in a control room. As they walk through, looking stoic and badass as always, one stormtrooper manages to ruin the moment by knocking his head against the low-hanging door. It looks like nobody in the editing room caught this mistake the first time around, so the take made it into the film. However, George Lucas acknowledged the quirky moment and actually added a sound effect in the special edition release that draws attention to the bumbling stormtrooper. Star Wars has seen a well-deserved resurgence in popularity with the recent release of The Force Awakens and the prequel film Rogue One. The next installment in the sequel trilogy, The Last Jedi, written and directed by Rian Johnson, hits theaters in December of this year.
Number 3, step forward.
The Usual Suspects. 1995's The Usual Suspects is a rare example of a great film that sprung out of nothing but a title and an idea for a poster. Director Bryan Singer and writer Christopher McQuarrie turned that seed of an idea into a classic film that tells the story of a small-time con artist through increasingly complex narration and flashback. The film stars Stephen Baldwin, Benicio del Toro, and Kevin Spacey, who won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance in the film. The Usual Suspects is notorious for its hysterical lineup scene, but you may not know that the scene was originally written to be very serious. On the day of shooting, Benicio del Toro must have had a lunch that didn't agree with him because he couldn't stop, well, farting during every take. It made all of the other actors crack up, and apparently Bryan Singer was extremely frustrated with the cast's inability to focus.
That guy is tense.
But upon reviewing the footage, the director realized that the change in tone actually made the scene much better, so he kept it in. I guess we can thank Benicio's butt for this classic scene. Foxcatcher. 2014's Foxcatcher stars Steve Carell in the transformative role of John DuPont, a multimillionaire who murders a young wrestler in pursuit of Olympic gold. The film is based on true events and sees Carell give one of the best performances of his career, alongside Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo. It may not have been a box office smash, but Foxcatcher received critical acclaim for its acting, and was even nominated for the Palme d'Or at the 2014 Cannes Film Festival. In one unforgettable scene, Channing Tatum gets a little too wrapped up in his performance and ends up creating an incredible moment that was kept in the final cut. During this scene, Tatum was just supposed to punch himself in the face a bit, but he committed hard and slammed his head right into the mirror. Needless to say, the blood in the remainder of the scene is real. He really sliced up his forehead. We can only imagine what was going through everyone's mind on set when they saw the actor lunge forward into the mirror. Well, that wasn't the only injury that Tatum sustained during Foxcatcher. In another scene, he asked co-star Mark Ruffalo to really fight him in a wrestling match, which resulted in a punctured eardrum for Tatum. Back to the Future Part 3. Our next entry comes from the third installment in the classic Robert Zemeckis trilogy, Back to the Future. The film stars Michael J. Fox as the young Marty McFly, who drives a time-traveling DeLorean invented by his friend Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd. Each film sees Marty and Doc travel to a different time period. In the first installment, Marty gets mixed up with his parents in 1955. In the second film, the gang travels to a dystopian future ruled by a powerful bully, and in Back to the Future Part 3, Marty travels way back in time to meet up with Doc in the Wild West. Part 3 was a satisfying conclusion to the franchise that saw Doc raising a family of his own in 1885. By all accounts, we're sure Doc Brown would make a great father, but in one memorable scene, the young actor playing his son looks to be having a bit of a tough time. If you look closely, you can see him awkwardly gesturing in the background toward his pants. We're thinking maybe the poor kid had to use the bathroom and was trying to remain professional and in character during the take.
You thought wrong, dude.
But he inadvertently created one of the most awkward Easter eggs in film history. I guess that's something to be proud of in its own way. Quantum of Solace. This has got to be one of the funniest cases of an extra making a dumb mistake in the background of a film. This one comes from 2008's Quantum of Solace, starring Daniel Craig in the iconic role of James Bond. This particular entry into the franchise was directed by Mark Forster, and while it may not have packed quite the same punch as its predecessor, Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace was still a box office smash, praised for its gritty performances and well-executed action sequences. This particular actor mistake kicked up a bit of dust online when it was turned into a GIF. In this shot, we can clearly see an extra pretending to sweep in the background. Now, sometimes, actors get really caught up in their characters' intentions and circumstances, and they forget the more simple aspects of their performance, like, I don't know, actually putting the broom on the ground. In this actor's defense, one Reddit user pointed out that it may not have been a mistake at all. Perhaps he was told to keep the broom above ground to avoid creating a cloud of dust, or muddying the soundtrack with the sound of sweeping.
Then give us time to gather enough evidence so you can make informed decisions.
And the shot was originally being filmed from another angle where you wouldn't have seen the broom. Now, this kind of thing happens all the time on set, but no matter how you look at it, someone is responsible for this hilarious mistake.
I want that mentioned in your report.
The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This next actor mistake is one that could have actually gotten someone seriously injured. Thankfully, no one was harmed in this take. It comes from the very first film in the epic Lord of the Rings franchise, 2001's The Fellowship of the Ring. Directed by Peter Jackson, Fellowship kicks off Frodo's adventure as he sets off to bring the One Ring to Mount Doom. The film was nominated for 13 Oscars at that year's Academy Awards, including Best Visual Effects, Best Supporting Actor for Ian McKellen, and of course, Best Picture. But we think Viggo Mortensen deserves a nod, not just for his performance as Aragorn, but for his incredible fighting skills and pinpoint reaction time. Mortensen trained tirelessly for the role, so that he'd be able to perform as much of the combat as possible by himself. Thankfully, he was well trained, because in one scene, the actor playing an orc made a huge mistake and accidentally hurled a knife straight at Mortensen. But the eagle-eyed actor saw the knife coming and actually deflected it with his sword. Like, actually deflected a knife with a freaking sword. If that's not badass, we don't know what is. North by Northwest. North by Northwest is one of Alfred Hitchcock's classic masterpieces. Released in 1959, North by Northwest stars Cary Grant as a man who gets mixed up in a mysterious government plot. The film is often cited as one of the greatest of all time, and was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 1995. Hitchcock may be a master of the classic thriller, with an incredible attention to detail. But there is one small detail that the legendary filmmaker missed during editing, and it has to do with a telling mistake made by an actor in the background. During one scene in a crowded cafeteria, Eve pulls a gun on Roger Thornhill and shoots him point blank. If you look closely in the background, you can see one young man anticipating the gunshot before it happens. As the altercation begins, he's already turned around watching the two characters and looking for the gun. Once Eve reveals the pistol, the extra can clearly be seen covering his ears well before the gun even fires. Thankfully, most people probably missed this actor error when watching the movie for the first time, but once you know about it, it's hard to look away.
Who are you?
It's not important.
Are you a ghost?
Zoolander. Ben Stiller's Zoolander is a true comedy classic. Released in 2001, the film tells the story of the eponymous air-headed male model as he becomes entangled in a conspiracy to assassinate the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Along the way, he teams up with reporter Matilda, played by Christine Taylor, and former rival model Hansel, played by Owen Wilson. While the long-awaited sequel may have been a bit of a disaster, we'll always have the hysterical original. Ben Stiller wore a lot of hats during the production of Zoolander. In addition to playing the title character, he also directed, co-wrote, and co-produced the film, so we can excuse him for getting a little mixed up and making a classic mistake on set, especially because it ended up leading to one of the funniest moments in the film. During the scene in which hand model J.P. Pruitt, played brilliantly by David Duchovny, is explaining the history of models as murderers, Ben Stiller asks,
But why male models?
After Duchovny's long speech, Stiller actually forgot his next line. He couldn't think of what to say, so he just repeated his last line. Thankfully, everyone else in the scene was able to keep a straight face, because this hysterical mistake ended up making the final cut. Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's 1982 film Blade Runner is a perfect blend of science fiction and film noir. Harrison Ford stars as Rick Deckard, a Blade Runner who makes his living hunting down rogue replicants, genetically engineered robots that are indistinguishable from human beings. Blade Runner is expertly directed, well acted, and features an incredible score by Vangelis. If you haven't seen it, make sure you check out the final cut, as there are 7 different versions of this film out there. In one scene, replicant Pris, played by Daryl Hannah, meets with genetic designer J.F. Sebastian. As she runs away, Hannah accidentally slips and falls into a car. Her elbow smashes right through the car window. This was a totally unplanned mistake, and the window was not made of breakaway glass. Hannah deserves a lot of credit for continuing the take through what must have been a very painful injury. It turns out she broke her elbow in 8 places. So far, we haven't heard about any similar injuries on the set of the new sequel, Blade Runner 2049. We're all incredibly excited to see the new film, which stars Ryan Gosling and sees Harrison Ford reprise his role as Deckard. Blade Runner 2049 hits theaters this October, and we can't wait.
Something very familiar about all this.
That's a wrap on today's video. Did we miss any big mistakes that you caught in one of your favorite films? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Screen Rant, and check out our playlist for endless binging. Oh, and don't think we forgot about the emoji trivia. The answer is... Did you get it? Let us know what you guessed, and as always, thanks for watching.